Greetings, my fellow freedom loving sovereign thinkers. This is LO3's newest podcast. My name is Craig, transmitting from the beautiful swampy mangroves of South Florida. And today's date, Monday, January 30th, 2017. Well. So, the executive order. Everyone's protesting and going after Donald Trump on this. And of course, the news, the Comedy News Network, is talking about this over and over and over again, digressing the daylights out of it and trying to drill it in your head. And don't get me wrong, on my past episode, I did talk about the draft of the executive order. I was pretty critical, and I'm not the only one, especially with Saudi Arabia and Pakistan wasn't on that list. But one thing I noticed for sure, and many others within the like-minded news, independent news networks, like We Are Change, for example, have addressed those 7 nations that were actually talked about on General Wesley Clark's interview on Democracy Now! Talk about the 7 countries from the Pentagon and how these countries are being, planned to be attacked and be conquered. So, and now look what happened. And of course, before that, Barack Obama made the authorization. So now Trump implemented. Where the hell were those people then? And of course, the attacks on Yemen and all that. Where are all these protesters now? Where was CARE, right? Bunch of blatant hypocrites. That's all I got to say. They're not activists. They're a bunch of frauds. Because the truth of the matter is, my friends, that's what they do. They want to manipulate. They want to have you say, hey, you're walking antimatter, follow us. And you're like, okay, like the Pied Piper playing the flute. And all the rats follow. This is why you got to start doing your own research. Do your homework. Study these facts. If you want true activism, you want merit, not be a parrot. Of course, you're not talking to a person not a Trump supporter anyway, but I'm seeing the bigger picture. I understand all sides, the pros and cons. Of course, you want to protect the people. How everything was being, there's a claim that there was some of these people that are coming in didn't have any meritability, where they're from and so forth, no background checks by any means, just roll them in there. So I can say that. And so one thing you got to observe about the other areas too, who's actually going to benefit. That's one thing you have to always think about. But I love it here. It's like Exploitation 101 by CNN. The anti-Trump fetish. Oh yeah. It's like I guess their favorite movies Crash. Okay, with Cronenberg's movie, the guy who did Rapid, when the car crashes and the fetish is going hand in hand. That's how CNN wants to manifest. Oh, I hate Trump. And they get aroused and they get orgasmic over it. I know, it's just hilarious, right? The Jim Jones syndrome, my brothers and sisters. So, speaking of that, I'm not going to go into the whole executive order bandwagon like these other clowns. However, there's a few things I like to throw in here. And it's mostly current events, foreign relations, and of course, milk. I go, what the hell? Oh, another thing too, George, there's reports even too about RT and a few others that George Soros wants to ruin the Hungarian government because they're calling him out. You have a problem, Jorge. People know what you are, and they know what your son is. It will backfire when you least expect it. Guarantee you that, my friend. Not my friend, chump. Patriot Benedict Arnold was more of a man than you ever be. So, without further ado, speaking of that, on Trump's executive orders, how about let's go, and this is from Activist Post, originally was written by Tony Cortelucci, who does stuff for the Alternate Tide News Network, Land Destroyer. He's really good. I gotta give him to him. So it got my attention. Here goes. Trump skips Saudis in anti-terror sweep. And it says here the Washington Post, in its recent article, orders ISIS plan talks with Putin and gives Bannon national security role. Attempts to portray U.S. President Donald Trump's recent moves as anti-terror in nature. In particular, the Washington Post states, President Trump on Saturday ordered the Pentagon to devise a strategy to defeat the Islamic State and restructure the National Security Council to include his controversial top political advisor as he forged a partnership with Russian President Vladimir Putin in his first official phone call. It's like how I look at it. Hey, defeat yourselves, Pentagon. I'm sorry, I'm just being. You just gotta examine these things and you understand where I'm coming from. While the Washington Post attempts to further divide and distract Americans with implications of a pro-Russian stance by the new U.S. administration, the paper skips past crucial aspects of President Trump's ISIS plan. The Post continues stating, even prior to the memo, military officials had been at work developing potential actions for Trump and Defense Secretary James Mattis to consider. Those include potentially deploying additional advisors to the Iraq and Syria, allowing U.S. military personnel to accompany local forces closer to the front lines and delegating greater decision-making power to field commanders. Imperialism still continues, right? The status quo. However, fighting terrorists downstream from their state sponsors is a losing battle, and U.S. Commander of the U.S. Forces Afghanistan General John Nicholson's December 2016 briefing on the continued U.S. occupation of Afghanistan has repeatedly noted the difficulties of defeating militants in the Central Asian state due to support and safe havens they enjoyed in neighboring states, including Pakistan. General Nicholson, of course, was referring to the Taliban, not Al-Qaeda or the so-called Islamic State, ISIS. These two terrorist organizations may have networks extending into Pakistan and elsewhere, but by both President Trump's own National Security Advisor Michael Flynn's admission, as revealed in a leaked 2012 Defense Intelligence Agency memo, and even by Trump's 2016 presidential opponent Hillary Clinton's acknowledgement in leaked emails. Saudi Arabia and Qatar are the premier state sponsors of these two notorious terrorist networks since their inception. And it's highlighted here. It says here, it's highlighted, if the situation unravels, there is a possibility of establishing a declared or undeclared Salafist principality in eastern Syria, Hasaka and Derzor. And this is exactly what the supporting powers of the opposition want in order to isolate the Syrian regime, which is considered the strategic death of the Shia expansion, Iraq, and Iran. And it's funny here and below of that says, highlighted, the West Gulf countries and Turkey support the opposition, while Russia, China, and Iran support the regime. Interesting, right? It should also be noted that not only did the 20 DIA memo reveal Saudi Arabia and Qatar as state sponsors, seeking the rise of what is time called a Salafist principality, but it also included the United States, Europe, and Turkey as seeking such an adversary with which to isolate the Syrian government. Tough talk, no action. Supporters of President Trump continuously referred concern analysis to a Twitter exchange Trump had with Saudi businessman and a member of the ruling Saudi family, Al-Laweed bin Talal. In it, Trump proclaimed, Dopey Prince Ali Tala wants to control our U.S. politicians with daddy's money. Can't do it when I get elected. Of course, hashtag Trump 2016. Yet now, as U.S. President, signed off on multiple intentionally distracting and controversial executive orders, including one targeting migrants from 7 majority Muslim nations, the U.S. and Saudi Arabia jointly destroyed over the past 20 years. Mention of Saudi Arabia and its roles it has played in sponsoring terrorism worldwide is absent. You can see the tweet there as well. Like all politicians and every U.S. president before Donald Trump, talk is cheap, used to target and manipulate the weakest minds among any nation's population. Action, however, is more difficult to manifest among deficient and or dishonest politicians and political parties. That President Trump is continuing America's partnership in terror with Saudi Arabia should be of no surprise to the public. Trump, even during his presidential campaign last year, surrounded himself with Bush-era neoconservative policymakers, corporate financier elitists, and the right-wing counterparts of the corporate media, including those elements cleverly disguised as alternative media such as Breitbart News. Objective adults weigh words against actions across the West. However, both President Trump's opponents and supporters appear mesmerized by his words, and entirely obvious to both his actions and their implications. For President Trump's actions to match his words, U.S. military, political, and financial support for the regimes in Riyadh and Doha would be necessity need to end. The exposure of sanctioning Saudi Qatari terrorism includes these Western interests who use both nations as proxies to wage war in Syria, Libya, Iraq, and beyond. Would also by necessity be required. The likelihood of President Trump doing any of this is non-existent. For the public, instead of being pulled into a rhetorical black hole, the Western corporate media is intentionally identifying the corporate financier special interest driving this U.S.-EU Gulf collaboration, exposing them, then isolating and entirely replacing them must take priority. Absolutely. So the more things change, the more it stays the same. So all you folks out there that are fighting, pro or against, you better wake the hell up. It's a lot bigger and more complex than all of us know. This is why you got to take the initiative on seeing things a lot broader than what they're presenting you. Don't be a victim of the Jim Jones syndrome. Be mind controlled, or get caught in psychic vampirism. Many of us out there, I'll say it again, question how come it's not Saudi Arabia as a Muslim country not allowed to be in here. So you have to really think about, my friends. This is a lot bigger than what it is. And if Trump's going to play that Pied Piper with his big mouth and his ultra tweets and keep the same status quo with a little twist to it, it'll become another Bush-Obama era. And hopefully that's not the case. But the whole thing is, my friends, you got to remain vigilant. Put everyone's feet to the fire. Okay, well, speaking of visas and so forth from this executive order, this is from digitaljournal.com, and it does talk about UN says U.S. visa ban does not affect its employees. The United Nations has received assurances from Washington that its employees from Muslim countries hit by the U.S. visa ban will be able to travel to New York to work at UN headquarters. UN spokesman Stephen Dujarric initially told a briefing Monday that a handful of staff was unable to board U.S.-bound flights over the weekend. He later clarified that there were no confirmed cases of UN staff members being affected by the new policies. On Friday, the U.S. President Donald Trump has signed an executive order suspending the arrival of all refugees for a minimum of 120 days, so 4 months, roughly. Syrian refugees indefinitely, and barring citizens from Iran, Iraq, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, Syria, and Yemen for 90 days. Some UN employees from the blacklisted countries have G4 visas, which are issued to staff of international organizations' class of visas that was deemed exempt in the order. We have gotten assurances from the U.S. mission that UN staff members from those 7 countries listed who have valid G4 visas will be allowed to come to the United States for their work, Dujarric said. The United Nations has said it hopes the visa ban will be temporary. but has not urged Trump to reverse course. Obviously, we have seen the confusion that has taken place over the last few days, and it is clear that it's of concern to us, said Dujarric, UN rights chief. Zaid bin Rajid Al Hussein called the ban illegal and mean-spirited, issuing the toughest response from the United Nations. Which I'm not too crazy about those bastards anyway, so I'll go on. Human Rights Watch called on the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres to take a clear stand and condemn the U.S. ban. At times when governments, civil society, and business leaders are increasingly speaking out, it is important that the UN's message not come solely from the UN's Human Rights Chief, said HRW Deputy Director of Global Advocacy Felipe Lopian. Secretary General Guterres should take clear the stance. Yeah, my dog's just doing a little run around. As I say, General Secretary Guterres should take a clear stand that Trump's executive order is a blow to refugees, reflects bigotry, and will do little to address terrorism. Well, I'll tell you this. The UNs are full of crap anyway in those other areas, but they do have exemptions for their people who are from those countries, who are working in these areas, can get through. So you gotta look. That's what I'm saying. So it's not going to be 100% effective. But one thing I know for sure, what Trump is doing, if it is a case that he's been listening to neocons like Rudy Giuliani, which that man is many to Mussolini, as far as I'm concerned. There's always going to be a flaw, okay? And another thing is too as well. If Trump really wants to see America great again, let's stop being a confounded empire. End it. Bring our troops home. Get people like Bush and Obama for war crimes. I know it's going to take time, but it's time to start making things make a difference. And even telling Israel to butt out in our affairs. And other countries as well. And I say that in good faith. Any questions? I'll say this again. Read Federalist Papers 2-5 by John Jay that a new nation should never be influenced by foreign countries, foreign influences. All right. Then you probably get a clearer picture what John Jay was talking about, and it's happening right now. So, next here came from the Daily Sheeple, Strategic Culture Foundation. And who wrote this? One moment. Ooh, don't know here. But it came from that Strategic Culture Foundation. It says here, boom! Official U.S. docs confirm Saudi government funds Al-Qaeda. As it reads here, the U.S. government doesn't also fund them. They founded them. It's by Eric Zosi. And says here, the Clinton email states we need to use our diplomatic and more traditional intelligence assets to bring pressure on the governments of Qatar and Saudi Arabia, which are providing clandestine financial and logistic support to ISIL and other radical Sunni groups in the region. That email from Hillary Clinton was sent 17th of August 2014. Any reference to the Saudi government is a reference to the Saudi royal family who own the Saudi government. It's their fiefdom. I report 17 February 2016 that on 3rd December 2009, U.S. Secretary of State Hillary Clinton sent a cable subsequently released by WikiLeaks to American ambassadors in Saudi Arabia, Qatar, UAE, Kuwait, and Pakistan headline terrorist finance actions request for senior level engagement on terrorism finance. She told those ambassadors to make clear to the given nations aristocrats that under the new U.S. President Barack Obama, there would no longer be an allowance for continuation of the donations to Al-Qaeda and other jihadist groups that attack the United States. It opened that this is an action request cable, meaning that the operations of the local U.S. embassy in the given nation would be monitored for compliance with the Secretary of State's request. Despite her assertion there was no accountability, yet she has continued to complain to them in private about those royals financing terrorist groups. On 11 February 2015, I headlined Al Qaeda's bookkeeper spills the beans and reported, which links to the U.S. courtroom documentation, that Zarakias Masawi was a bookkeeper and bagman, money collector for Al Qaeda, but the U.S. intelligence services have been keeping this fact secret as much as they can, because what he knows about the crucial financial backers of Al Qaeda can be very damaging to the U.S. atrocities, which is heavily oil-based and closely allied with the Saudi royal family, which created Al Qaeda in order to please the Saudi clerics, who are robust Muslims who constantly threaten the world with exposure of their economic and sexual corruption unless royals finance the spread of Wahhabist sect, such as by Al Qaeda, and thereby finance the spread of those clerics' own international influence and power. Or, so say, the former bookkeeper of Al Qaeda, who was selected by Al Qaeda's military chief Abu Hafs, also known as Mohammed Atif, to serve Osama bin Laden in that capacity, Zarakias Mawzawi, and this is his testimony in brief. Mawzawi swore in court that he collected multi-million-dollar cash donations to Al Qaeda from Walid bin Talal, Prince Turki al-Faisal al-Saud Prince Badr bin Sultan al-Saud, Prince Mohammed al-Faisal al-Saud, and other Saudi royals. He was asked how important this was to Al Qaeda, and he replied it was crucial. I mean, without the money the Saudi you will have nothing. This courtroom testimony remains suppressed to the present day, virtually entirely ignored in the press, and without the 9/11 families having pushed the legal issue, this testimony never would even have occurred at all. On September 2016, I reported the missing 28 pages, which were actually 29, which till recently kept secret, expurgated actually from the congressional study on the original 9/11 attacks, and noted that what document actually showed and proved and cited FBI investigators who have been testified in public if requested, was the opposite of an unimportant that the Saudi ambassador to the United States, Prince Bandar bin Sultan Al Saud, who was known in Washington as Bandar Bush because of his closeness to the Bush family, had secretly been paying the Saudi handlers of at least 2 of the 15 Saudis among the 19 9/11 hijackers, and that Badar's wife and other relatives were also paying those hijackers to be and their families, thus enabling the future hijackers to obtain the necessary pilot training, etc., for the 9/11 attacks. Interesting there, huh? Why then did U.S. President Barack Obama, who was oath-bound to the U.S. Constitution, to the American people, veto a bill that Congress finally passed, allowing 9/11 families to sue the Saudi government, the Saudi royal family, for 9/11? Whom is Obama protecting, and why? Does anyone publicly ask this question to him? I could tell you this, because he's a bend-over Bob and proud. I will continue on. Note, this ain't the same person, Obama, who protects the Sauds, said as follows about the non-sectarian separation of the church and state committed anti-jihadist leader of Syria, Bashar al-Assad, whom the U.S. Saudi governments back Al-Qaeda and other jihadist groups in Syria in order to overthrow. As a Wall Street Journal headline on 19th November 2015, Obama says Syrian leader Bashar Assad must go. And they reported his argument is because it is unimaginable that you can stop a civil war here when the overwhelming majority of the people in Syria consider him to be brutal and murderous dictator. he cannot regain legitimacy. Obama says that Al-Qaeda in Syria and other such jihadists, whom he calls moderate rebels, there should overthrow Assad and would presumably be more legitimate there. Yes, that's from Drone Man himself, okay? Barry Soetoro. Drone Man knows best. Come on, what a wet dream that man was, huh? That's president. But in reality, even Western-sponsored polls have consistently shown that Assad is the only person in Syria whom more than 50% of the Syrian people actually want to be their leader, and that the U.S. itself is loath there because it is viewed by 82% of Syrians as being blamed for the tens of thousands of jihadists who have been imported into Syria, paid for by the Saudis, and militarily trained by the Americans, causing immeasurable misery for the Syrian people. Why are American presidents impeached for extramarital sex, but for not being traitors and for supporting America's actual enemies against the interests of the 9/11 victims and the rest of the American people? Is America's government against the interests of the American people? If so, whom does it really represent and why? There's other links you can check on here as well. Because you know why? Because they're all part of the New World Order network. Yeah. That's how it really is, my friends. If you look at this more firmly, it gets too obvious. When you see the patterns repeat itself, it's being blatantly exposed. So this is why you always have to study these areas and be critical thinkers. All right, and that's not surprised at all. CIA, Al-Qaeda, ISIS, New World Order funded, whether it's from Saudi Arabia, United States, Israel, etc. Same crap, different package. All under the same umbrella. Okay, next one here came from Information Liberation. And I know, was it Natural News got a link for that, so I went further. And it says here, Obama bombed 5 out of 7 countries Trump banned. Media didn't care. Chris Manahan. And as it reads here, while the lying media is freaking out over President Trump's travel ban for 7 Middle Eastern countries deemed security risk, they didn't even give a damn about Obama bombing them. That's right, you activists are a bunch of damn hypocrites, including those pathetic individuals such as Nancy Pelosi and Charles Pinocchio Schumer. Okay? And I say that, I like to call Schumer Pinocchio because he is a Gino, not a Jew by faith. Okay? A Gino, a Jew Judaic in name only. That's not being anti-Semitic. So don't even think about it, all right? While through the media is currently tizzying because Trump's executive order held around 300 people at airports, Obama's bombings were reported as completely reasonable to bring about peace. That's right. We have a humanitarian mission in Libya. Pina microphone to you, please, Mr. President. Explain that. Out of the 7 countries that were banned by President Trump last Friday, 5 were bombed by the Obama administration: Syria, Iraq, Yemen, Libya, and Somalia. Trump banned these people from America is bad. Obama bombing these people is good. He's so special. Where were the George Soros-funded organizations protesting the nearly 100 attacks that have occurred since 2009 in Yemen, resulting in the deaths of hundreds of militants, but also many civilians? Did Chuck Schumer shed a tear for the 62 Syrian troops killed and more 100 wounded that the Obama administration actually bombed in 2016? Into the video, I don't have to. You can see it for yourself. Chuck Schumer cries like a bitch over Trump refugee ban. Yeah, you pathetic weasel. You are a fraud and a treasonous piece of garbage. You make Benedict Arnold a patriot, okay, Chucky boy? And I'll continue on here. Did Schumer openly weep when the Obama administration was duped into attacking Somali troops and killed 22 of them in an airstrike late last year? Absolutely not. It is fine for the Nobel Peace Prize winning president to bomb these people in their own countries, but for President Trump to temporarily prevent them from traveling to our country to keep America safe is un-American and unconstitutional. That's right, my friends. Let's be two-faced, let's get down, Drive on hypocrisy makes me a man because I'm a sham guy. Let's go, and I'm sorry, I don't miss Prince in general. I said like really big fan of his. I just hate the hype. But yeah, like I said, where were all these people? Because they believe, like all these clowns, these individuals that manifest over Occupy Democrats and post the stuff with the memes on the Facebook page, think that makes them feel good. Yeah, here's a person I love, but this guy I can't stand. But but the people, the two from the opposite parties, think the same way. But that's okay, because one supports the jackass, one supports the elephant. Remember, elephants and asses are screwing the masses. All right. And that's why I'm calling those folks out. How come he didn't go out there protesting when Obama was bombing these countries, especially with Libya? Okay? How come you're not out there protesting? Well, if there's a war and Trump's involved, you're all going to be protesting and going, lynch him, lynch him, lynch him. Because you know why? Because there's just a bunch of parrots and herd conformists. I'm not saying I'm better than you, but you got to take the initiative on seeing things a lot bigger. So you know what? This is why I tell people I never liked Obama. Even when I first seen him spoke, I wasn't impressed by his rhetoric. I take the initiative to look at his voting record, and that man should have been thrown in prison a long time ago. All right? Long before he became president. Not because of his skin color, but he's another unmeritable politician. If you can't handle it, folks, too bad, because the truth really hurts. All right, next one here came out on the 25th. Interesting, and I thank David Icke for sharing this on his Twitter. It says here, 100,000 hours of isolation. Gaza blockade enters its 12th year. This is from Geneva. A recent report by the Euro-Mediterranean Human Rights Monitor exposes the catastrophic consequences of Israel. 11-year-long blockade on the Gaza Strip. While Israel is on the continuous long history of isolating Gaza, yet at unprecedented length and severity since 2006, the international community shoulders this isolation with silence and oblivion. The consequences of the blockade continue to aggravate in unimaginable ways, says Rami Abdul, chairman of the Euro-Med Monitor. The multifaceted and interconnected crisis documented in our report communicated much about civilian suffering in the Gaza Strip. Over 2 million people struggle with both growing rates of poverty, unemployment, food insecurity, and with diminishing qualities of basic services, including electricity, water, education, and healthcare. The report, Gaza, 100,000 hours of isolation taking after the estimate duration of the blockade, brings to the attention yet more shocking statistics of the humanitarian situation in Gaza. 65% of Gazans suffer from poverty. 72% are food insecure, and 8% have grown dependent on international aid. 43% of Palestinians in Gaza face the heavy economic and social burdens of unemployment. This percentage, recorded in the fourth quarter of 2016, is unprecedentedly high, especially when compared to the West Bank, staying at 18.7%. For 11 years, Israel has systematically used two policies of isolation and division, in addition to violence, and keep the humanitarian situation in Gaza growing worse and worse, Abdul said. The fact our report explains are simple. Maintaining complete control over the Gaza Strip, Israel remains the occupying power, and as such must assume the responsibility for suffering of an entire population it has collectively punished for over a decade. For 11 years now, I cited the report, Israel has exercised absolute authority on commercial, non-commercial entry and exit points, controlling trade, the entry of international aid, vital medical equipment and construction and other necessary materials, and the issuing of leave and re-entry permits for students wishing to study abroad, professionals with job offers in foreign countries, and patients needing treatment unavailable in the Gaza Strip. The blockade, entering its 12th year, has caused numerous economic losses. With Israel's restriction on movements of export and imports and of traders, it is harder than ever to start up a business or to develop an old one. This recession, nonetheless, has been typical of the blockade years, during which crossings from into the Gaza Strip remained closed most of the time. For example, Kareem Shalom crossing was closed for 36% of the days in 2016. Israel's offenses on Palestinians are not only military and economic but also humanitarian, says Maha Hassani, Euromed Monitor Office Manager in the Palestinian territories. A large number of patients seeking treatment in the West Bank, Israel, or abroad are systematically and arbitrarily denied permits to leave Gaza. Our research confirms that during the fourth quarter of 2016, only 44% of patient requests for Israeli permits were approved. 1 in every 4 Palestinian children in Gaza still needs to receive psychosocial support to overcome the traumatic memories of violence witnessed during Operation Protective Edge. Between January and December of 2016, 1,900 of the 3,700 arrest crossing permits for Palestinian businessmen were deliberately canceled. In late 2016, Israel approved only 50% of permit requests for medical purposes, which is only very low compared to the percentage in 2012, standing at 92.5%. Israel's frequent killing and detention of Gazan fishermen in Palestinian territorial waters has led to the drop of their number from 10,000 in 2000 to 4,000 in 2016. 95% of those fishermen now rely on international aid in providing for their families, according to the UN Office Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs. Israel has been leading Palestinians to more and more suffering, political, economic, physical, mental, and humanitarian, concludes Hassani. With a dense population long subjected to intense suffering, Gaza cannot stand too long on its brink of collapse. Israel must abide by its legal obligations and the international community by its humanitarian responsibilities. We reiterate our belief in the need for ending the siege as a precondition to improving not only the lives of the Palestinians, but also the prospects of security and peace. The Euro-Mediterranean Human Rights Monitor, therefore, urgently demands the international community to help elevate immediately the blockade on the Gaza Strip. First, we demand the Israeli government to end the blockade. Second, we call on the Israeli government to end the targeting of innocent citizens, a practice in violation of the 1949 Geneva Convention. Third, we call on the Egyptian government to open Rafah crossing for passengers and goods without any restrictions. Fourth, we call on the international community to hold Israel accountable for its continuous human rights violations and to economically sanction Israel until it respects Palestinian human rights. The international community should be able to separate between the collective punishment of the Palestinians by Israel and the political conflict between Palestine and Israel. Fifth, we call on the international community, the EU, and the U.S. in particular to initiate the support and the need of the seaport in Gaza that guarantees the free import and export of goods and private international travel. Commitments for the seaport in Gaza not only addresses a priority and the needs of the Palestinians, but also serves as political support for the desire to gain independence. And there's a link. You can read the full report. Very interesting stuff. As far as I'm concerned, we got to stop all foreign aid, including Israel. That would be the thing I can recommend. Okay, so I'm not going to be biased. I want to do it across the board. Everyone's talking about redistribution of wealth is not good, and they still support foreign aid to Israel. That's double speak, my friends. Nothing against the people themselves, just their government are very conniving also. This is another example of the parasite of society. It's like every government around the world. Okay, to make that clear. The Palestinians are human beings as well. Many of them too are Judaic by faith, Christians, not all Muslims. Okay, so they have that Middle Eastern or Abrahamic ideology. People got this whole thing got to stop. Okay, it's an act of war when you think about it. And this is an example. What's happening in Gaza? At least happening in Romania too, if I'm correct. This thing's got to stop. Let the people live in peace. Let the people get along. Okay? Piss on your governmental delegates. Tired of this crap and what's going on. I can see true peace, security, and spiritual prosperity happen worldwide. So yeah, I support. Let Gaza do their thing. The people in Gaza do their thing. People should do their trade. It's none of anyone's damn business. And that's really it on that side, in that area. All right, finally, enough of the geopolitical aspect. Let's talk about milk. From News Target by Vicky Bax. Came out yesterday. It says, dairy industry attempting to spike milk with chemical ingredient that causes brain tumors. It says here, the dairy industry has seen their profits plummet over the last several years. Health-conscious consumers have been ditching calorie-laden beverages in favor of water and other low-calorie alternatives. Even though there have been studies that demonstrated milk offers nutritional benefits, people still aren't buying as much as they used to. And in our profit-driven world, that is an issue that the dairy industry is clamoring to remedy. The International Dairy Food Association and the National Milk Producers Federation petitioned the FDA to amend the standard identity for milk and 17 other dairy products. They have the FDA news there. You can check out the link. Why? So they could use any kind of approved sweetener, including artificial sweeteners like aspartame, without having to indicate that the beverage contained a sugar substitute on the label. Items that contain artificial sweeteners and other ingredients to reduce their calorie counts are required by the state to indicate that they are reduced calorie on the label. According to the IDFA and the NMPF, this label is a turnoff for many consumers. Perhaps this is because many people try to avoid consuming artificial sweeteners. Regardless, their deceitful proposal would remove the tall tale phrase from the product's labels, but it would not impact the actual ingredient list. However, that means no one would have to inspect the ingredient list on every milk bottle they purchase to ensure no undesirable ingredients are present. Related, to learn more about what's hiding in your food at ingredients.news. How many people would actually do this, and how many would actually be aware that they had to? The industry relies on consumer ignorance to sell products. A proposal such as this clearly demonstrates that they are trying to fool people into buying milk sweetened with a chemical they would otherwise avoid. How this is being considered as a possibility. Americans have the right to know what's in their food, and the industry, like big dairy, do not have the right to be deceitful. Many other products would still be subject to bearing to reduced calorie label. Why should they get it a pass? There is no reason for milk or any other foodstuff to lie what it contains, especially when it contains a harmful chemical like aspartame. And as it says here, aspartame has a subject of immense scrutiny for quite some time. In 1996, a study published by the Journal of Neuropathology and Experimental Neurology posted, compared to other environmental factors putatively linked to brain tumors, the artificial sweetener aspartame is a promising candidate to explain the recent increase in incidence and degree of malignancy of brain tumors. The research team from the Washington University Medical School noted that at that time, evidence that potentially indicated aspartame as cause of brain tumors included an animal study that revealed an exceedingly high incidence of brain tumors in rats that have been fed aspartame compared to no brain tumors at all in the concurrent control group. The team states that aspartame was introduced into the U.S. food and beverage market just a few short years prior to the drastic increase in brain tumor incidence and the malignancy around the country. In their conclusion, the researchers stated, "We conclude that there is need for reassessing the carcinogenic potential of aspartame. That was just over 2 decades ago. Research has continued to demonstrate that aspartame poses a threat to overall health and can be especially harmful to the brain. A more recent study, published in 2007, found that exposure to aspartame over the course of rodents' lifespans greatly increased the incidence of lymphomas and leukemias in both male and female rats. Female rats exposed to aspartame also exhibited an increased incidence of mammary cancer. That's like the mammary glands. The team concluded the results of this carcinogenicity bioassay confirm and reinforce the first experimental demonstration of aspartame's multipotential carcinogenicity at dose level to the acceptable daily intake for humans. The team also noted that when exposure began during fetal life, the carcinogenic effects were amplified. Several researchers from that study went to publish a report in 2014 entitled The Carcinogenic Effects of Aspartame, the Urgent Need for Regulatory Reevaluation. In that report, the team discussed the increasing evidence of aspartame's toxic and carcinogenic nature. In the abstract, the researchers concluded, on the basis of the evidence of the potential carcinogenic effects of aspartame, herein reported a reevaluation of the current position of international regulatory agency must be considered an urgent matter of public health. And this is what the dairy industry want to put in milk to trick the children to drinking it. And the source is on here too. You can check it out yourselves. And I'm like, wow, my, oh my. Unbelievable, my friends. You better off just getting raw milk from the farmers. Okay? It's not all been homogenized and all that stuff. So you got the better nutrients than what they're trying to put in this crap. Downright nefarious and unacceptable. These bastards should be thrown in jail. If I did it, they'll lock my ass up and throw away the key. What makes these people special, right? Going to the FDA, it tells you one thing, my friends. They hate the open free market. So whatever you do, folks, avoid these corporate companies that want to put this crap in your milk. Get raw milk at multiple places. Some states, I know in Florida, you can get it at a pet store, okay? And it's legit. They say you can't drink in humans, go to the pet store and buy it. Or not, go to the farmers, get raw milk. And as they say it's against the law, I say it is unconstitutional. If there's no victim, there's no crime. Plain and simple. If the FDA accepts this, they can stick it. And that's all I got to say. All right, my friend, I'd like to thank everyone for listening. Plus, feel free to download and share throughout your social media networks. If you have any questions, comments, or you want to send me something that's interesting that I may want to check out, whatever you do, please send your correspondences with decorum. You can hit me on Facebook, Twitter, Google+, Spreaker, iHeartRadio, Tumblr, YouTube, Freedoms Network, Scene.life, or Minds.com. In addition, you could email me at LokiLuck3, which is look at the number 3 altogether, at gmail.com. Once again, thank you for your time. Plus, always remember that the demonic resistance is healthy for the soul and can liberate humanity. Until next time, take care of yourselves, keep on spreading the love, and may your guardian spirits be with you.